Did you get a chance to see Avatar 2?
No.
Oh man.
Can me and Wilson talk about it with you?
Yeah.
Can we digress
I don't
on
care.
this? Because
I don't give a shit about this movie. Yeah,
Wilson and I have a lot to say about what they introduce into this universe that maybe you have some perspective on where they could go with this, because like, what did you take away from the first movie, Eric?
Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves, sure. Did you get some Pocahontas vibes or Fern Gully vibes?
Yeah. Man bad, destroy environment. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely environment safety, or like preserve environment, right? Natural resources good.
Man want natural resource.
Colonization bad.
Yeah. Man want to take natural resource from natives.
But like,
that's what it was.
As far as like that, like the main story bits go, when they started talking about Awa, right? Awa was a big feature, and like, what do you perceive?
God.
You think Awa is like a god?
When did you last watch that first Avatar movie, Bradshaw?
When did it come out?
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's a trash movie.
So in the second movie,
but
yeah, go ahead, Wilson.
I don't disagree with you, Eric. But do you not find it entertaining at all?
Yeah, it was entertaining enough.
Okay. Good enough for me.
Okay.
It looked good. It looked pretty.
I like the world building. It was thought out a little bit. Like, it was interesting to be. James Cameron's like, this is going to be my Star Wars, but I'm going to make it just about this planet and its different biomes and things like that. So the first one was definitely the forest adventure, and the second one is very much
water adventure.
Water adventure, right? But still having that connecting thread of Awa being a big thing. And how they communicate, and how... And here's where it gets convoluted and really messy when Wilson and I discussed. It's how they can basically live forever through Awa. Now, in the second movie, there's characters. Sigourney Weaver's clone avatar persona can commune with Awa and control different plant life around this like little reef thing,
and animal life too. And she's just able to like
she's like some weird messiah thing.
Yeah, she plugs into the conduit like this, like in the forest world there was like their world tree, and that was like a direct connection to Awa. And then in this new water one, there's like they dive deep down and they find like
it's like a big coral kind of
similar thing,
or like world tree kind of thing.
And then she connects into that, and she can commune with Awa, and then what she's basically doing is communicating with previously or like deceased members of their tribe and things like that. So a big event happens where a critical character dies, and they can now commune with this dead person in this kind of spirit realm, right? But then they also introduce this very strange creature. It's basically a space whale, and instead of like colonizing and terraforming Pandora, or no, in the first one it was like we're gonna come and steal this material called unobtainium, right? And then bring it back to Earth to save Earth. Now it's like, oh, all the people from Earth are now gonna terraform Pandora so they can live there, and have, like, that's gonna be their new Earth. So to fund this, they're sending these poachers to kill these space whales, because this, the space whales have this brain fluid basically in their bone marrow or something like that can make human life immortal. Like, you can basically be immortal if you have this element from this whale.
Of course.
But, you know, it's again going back to the preserve natural habitats and save the oceans kind of thing, where it's like, we shouldn't be killing these gentle giants, because in the movie they said, oh, because of this brain fluid they have so much heightened emotion that they have poetry, they have songs, they're so like in tune with their emotions and things like that, more so than humans would ever conceive of.
Naturally,
So,
yeah.
and then it gets to be like, all right, they're going there poaching all this chemical stuff, but then one of the tribes of Jake Sully's kids befriends one of them and like starts communicating with them, one of these big space whales. So that becomes a very weird plot point too. It's like he's trying to expand, and this is where I think he's trying to make his own Star Wars, because Star Wars has Force ghosts, and like through the light side of the Force, you can eventually never pass on. You just become part of the living Force, right? You become a Force ghost. And that's what he's trying to like convey, of like, I have this really mystical tribal alien species that have a communication to this ancient deity that they can then basically live forever. So he's like peeling back different layers of this as he makes these movies, I think.
Yep.
And it's just like a weird, and I'm just like maybe speculating on maybe his motives with this, because the first one was definitely just preserve natural resources and things like that, and this one's definitely getting more into like the spiritual vibes of things.
Yeah,
where it's like it's a family dynamic, but there's this kind of strange thing with his adoptive daughter, which is Sigourney Weaver's character, that is very much in tune to Awa, and that's where I think it's like interesting, because you remember in the first one, right, where Sigourney dies, right?
Yep.
She dies during their ceremony of them trying to take her life essence from her human body and put it back into her avatar body, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in a weird way, I thought it'd be interesting that the ritual that they were doing kind of succeeded in a way.
Yeah.
And Awa just took her life essence and just kept it there and didn't put in her grown-up avatar body. She then used it to grow this kid version of Sigourney, like an imprint of the adult one, into like a Jesus type.
Blue cat person Jesus. Yep.
Yeah, blue cat Jesus, but gender swapped Sigourney.
Yeah. Gender swapped blue cat Jesus. Yep.
Jesus.
There we go.
But yeah, that has not come to light at all in the story. It's just maybe what I'm speculating that could happen, but it's definitely leaning towards something like that because of this. You know, she's in tune with Awa, and it makes sense that maybe Awa took her soul, or whatever you would say.
Your soul is mine.
And used it for future use, and then it's basically maybe even part Sigourney, part Awa being manifest. Yeah. So now
Sagewa, yep.
Sagewa. Sakakawea.
Yep.
I mean, it's getting more weird as the series goes on, and that's like maybe something that you could hook onto, because you do like the mysticism and like the spiritual aspect of the Star Wars stuff more so than like the flight and the wars of stars, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe you could grab onto something there, but I don't know. It was just a weird conversation that Wilson and I had, because it becomes so strange when you think about where they could go with the story now that these things have been, you know, kind of elaborated on a little bit more.
Right.
Like, where would they go next, you know? The desert?
Showdown with Humans, Part 3. Yeah, so... you done air, we done water. Is it fire time? Are we gonna find people that live in volcanoes?
That would be cool.
Do that.
There's like a cave dwelling tribe, and they like live towards the core, where like A was the most powerful, maybe.
The planet core. Well, what's the fucking thing going to be then? Because we already had like the ore that they were going after, and it was in the forest under this big tree.
Yeah, and it grew that tree that big, and then
they find that the source of power is deep within the planet. Awa is the planet. So,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that could be too. Yeah.
One thing that
There's just
I
a
had.
giant ass blue cat person in the middle of the planet.
It's just a big blue cat.
I'd be okay with that. I'd be like, all right, James, let's fucking get it. Let's see some weird shit.
No, I like
Yeah.
the idea of like Awa being a living thing, and like they're what was it recently that I watched? Was it Strange Planet or Strange World on Disney?
Yeah, the Disney movie
You watched that at
that
all?
nobody saw. No.
No. I was tuning in and out of it, but then like the main, I don't know, I'm gonna spoil it for you guys. The
Don't care.
main story was like, oh, they have been living on the back of a beast. And they just didn't know
Oh.
it.
Bumblebees?
And so like they've been
Yeah,
they've been hunting the
the
blood
planet-
cells. Like,
I mean,
What
I
if
bet
the
that.
planet? What if the planet is just formed around the body or corpse of one of those big ass fucking space whale things? You know?
yeah.
I totally do think that that sounds likely. That like Awa is the planet itself,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Pandora is Awa, so you can't separate one from the other. Like the
Yeah.
planet Pandora is the physical aspect, and Awa is the energy within the planet.
Yep.
Yep.
But
And
they're both the same, and they're living.
Yep. If I know with how predictable James Cameron's fucking story is going to be, it's going to be something like that.
I can get on that.
One thing that I thought of when you're talking to Eric about all this stuff, Tyler, that I didn't think of before
Mhm.
is it's not something that they like did overtly in the movie, but maybe they were trying to subtly set it up, was kind of doing a like darker mirror image of Sigourney Weaver's character and fucking the military man, because he gets reborn in a new body and he kind of has to go on this journey of like a second life, finding purpose, discovering who
yes.
he is and what it means.
That's also
Same
something
thing
we
with Sigourney
discussed.
Weaver.
We should talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah,
But yeah, same thing with Sigourney Weaver. Like,
but
there's
they
a dark...
they never were like, typically in movies they would be like, oh, you know, we're gonna put two characters, same situation, but one's gonna be good, one's gonna be bad. We'll put them in similar scenarios and see how each one reacts. So, you know, maybe it's
Yep.
like each person gets mugged on the street and one person's just like, hey man, why are you doing that? Let's get you some help. Let's fucking, like, maybe he disarms them and is like, gives him a quick smack, but then is like, hey, no, that's not good. And then the other person just kills the mugger.
Mhm.
But they didn't do that. They didn't like ever try to directly compare the two characters, but maybe they were soft setting that up for future movies.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because when we kind of elaborated on the military guy that was killed by Tiri in the first movie, we didn't mention this, Bracho, but I guess before they went to do that, they went to go fight Natiri, and where that guy died, like the main bad guy died in the first one, he left his DNA save state, like backup, somewhere in a jar, so they could basically make you again, but like clone you with all your memories that are like on this little hard drive. And that's another element that we didn't talk about, that is another way of preserving your life, where it's probably not it's probably really expensive to bring back somebody from the dead by using like their USB cylinder thing. But also we were trying to think of like ways why he would come back. Like, why couldn't they just grow babies? Because avatars cost a lot of money, right? Like building an avatar. That's why Jake Sully, when he showed up, he's like, oh, I'm like the genetic identical to my brother, so I can use his avatar. It's like, oh, great, so we don't have to like spend money to make another one. Why don't they just start cloning babies? Because those seem like a little bit less intensive.
My question is, fucking bad guy busted a nut at some point because he got a kid.
Yeah, apparently.
Apparently he did.
Did he bust a nut on Pandora, or was it like...
No, we have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that was never... They didn't elaborate too much on his kid and the origin. because
Spider or whatever the fuck his XX name is.
It is Spider.
it is
You're
Spider.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spider.
It's his hacker name.
Mm-hmm.
SPY.
God damn it.
But yeah, he becomes Jake Sully's like adopted kid and part of that tribe, and you know, bares his teeth at the enemy and is like,
yeah,
and like hoots at him, you know, like.
But then he was like, maybe help Daddy, and then he was like, oh shit, Daddy bad.
Yeah, but then you're led to believe like maybe
Daddy a baddie.
when the movie ends, you're probably led to believe like, oh, maybe in the next movie, the bad guy is now an avatar. He's now a blue kitty cat. He's probably going to go off and stumble upon another tribe, and he's going to go through some kind of like ritual thing where he becomes like the leader of the pack. He's going to become the alpha, omega, macho dude. And then they're going to have a run-in again with Jake Sully, and they're like, well, no, I'm the charge of this tribe, bud. Want to go? Like, they're going to have still, like, confrontations and things like that could arise. And that's just where I see, like, naturally how stories like that work out. Like, he's going to eventually become, like, anti-hero Vegeta kind of character, maybe. Where he's like, oh, I can understand now why we want to preserve this, because I found love here, you know? I've found, like, a new perspective on life becoming a blue kitty cat. That's just where generally that's where a lot of tropey kind of story beats go for bad guys. If they keep them alive for this long, like, he's not just dead in the first movie. He's like, oh, well, they brought him back for a reason. He's probably going to have a prolonged story, so they might make him somewhat good, somewhat kind of, you know, cantankerous, anti-hero, whatever.
Yeah, I suppose.
I guess
you don't think he's too far gone at this point?
No, because he's got the kid, and the kid's kind of pulling him to the light. It's going to be like Darth Vader and Luke. That's kind of where I see that. Like, I'm trying to relate it to maybe James Cameron's just playing by that Star Wars playbook, by like, oh, no, nobody's really dead. Nobody's really gone. You know, like, somehow Palpatine returned. Somehow this guy returned.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron isn't the most original storyteller, so.
Very much so. He's very much of a spectacle and show, don't tell. Like, here, Star Wars did it, I'll just do my own spin on it. And before that, I'm sure Star Wars borrowed those elements from some other thing, too, so.
Yep.
Do you think you'll see it, though, eventually?
Yeah, probably. I don't know if I'm going to make the time to go see it in the theater, but, you know.
It's already getting the box office records.
Yeah, well.
That's got to drop off.
Yeah.
It is. It is. They've been aiming to hit 2 billion for like a couple weeks now.
Yeah, and I don't know how long
they're on
it
a
goes.
slow creep to 2 billion.
I don't know how long it goes overseas before they like start saying, "All right, we're done hearing it."
Yeah, and I meant more like, I think for the next one that comes out, I don't know that it will necessarily make as much money as these two. I think that's kind of like an obvious thing to say, but I don't know.
Well,
these two both benefited from the hype trains behind them, right?
Yeah, you kind of heard about his production schedule with this broad show?
Yeah.
So like he's writing them and shooting them all in tandem, but then like,
well, he's already made the third one.
He already made the third one, but he's
and parts of the fourth one.
Parts of the fourth one because there's going to be a time jump, and he's waiting for the characters to age up in real time. So it was like,
right.
He recorded all the things he needed to from the younger kids, but then he
didn't want them to age out of what he needed them to be.
Which is kind of weird, don't you think? Like, they pitch shifted Sigourney, and she's like, what, over 60 years old, and they made her a teenager? Like, I don't understand. Like, he's working with blue kitty cat.
James
CGI.
Cameron thinking he's clever when he's actually not clever.
Well,
It's like, I'm
Sigourney
doing a Boyhood.
is one thing. Sigourney's one thing. That's like a legacy actor for him. So
I know.
no matter what age she is, he wants her in there. And she was already in the previous movie as another character, so there's less reason to like specifically just I don't know.
Yeah, and her name was Grace, which is another thing to tie into the spirituality aspect thing. A lot of people like are given that question, like, "Hey, name one character from Avatar," and like they just couldn't do it. And somebody did that to me. I'm like, "Oh, Jake Sully," and they're like, "Who's that?" I was like, "He's the main guy."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, okay, name another one." I'm like, "Well, I think Natiri," and that was the only other one I know. And then I just said, "I think."
What's the other main character?
Giovanni Ribisi.
Right? Yeah, I can name actors.
I said Giovanni Ribisi.
Fucking
Stephen Lang.
Yeah.
Carmella.
Carmella.
Yeah, Carmella was in this one.
That pulled me out of the movie so hard. I was just watching the movie and I'm like, okay. I mean, yeah, more Avatar, more Pandora. Well, is that Carmella?
What's she doing in military fatigues? What's going on here?
What's she doing in space?
What's she doing?
Clearly, she left Tony.
She left Tony.
Yeah.
Carmella. I like that. That's funny. Well, even she thought the movie flopped. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, that's hilarious.
She's
Yeah.
like, wait, I thought it already came out. I like filmed that stuff like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Why? Because I saw it and I was like, oh, yeah, they must have filmed this like a while ago. Because it's so weird. The whole franchise to me is odd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very odd.
Who else do you think could realistically, like, besides maybe Spielberg or like Coppola or like the biggest names of directors? Who else do you think could have the real clout behind them to pull off a fucking like decade long franchise? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing that it would be a natural timeline, but it's a different thing altogether for him to kind of like plan it for it to be that long.
Right.
Yeah.
It's different when it's
Well,
it's
I mean,
James Cameron. It's it's a single guy, but when it's a studio like Marvel, they have that stuff planned out.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean
the-
that makes sense. As a studio, you want to have stuff like at least hypothetically set in advance 10, 20, 30 years. You're not going to stop making movies, but it's one person.
Was it Richard Linklater? Who was it that did the a trilogy of movies that took place many years apart?
Yeah, that was Linklater. The After series or the After, like before sunset,
Maybe, I don't know.
after sunrise, before sunset, with
Yeah,
Ethan
where it was
Hawke
like it
and
had like a
Julie
family
Depley.
and they aged in real time, obviously, because the movies were filmed years apart.
Yeah, it's at different points in their life. It's like 20s, 30s, and 40s, basically. I think
Something like that. Well, there was one with a kid too.
that
Was that one?
That was Boyhood. Is that the one you're thinking of, where he basically filmed the
Well-
kid 1 year for like 12 years or something like that?
Yeah, so I was conflating those two together.
It's the
but-
same guy. It's the same guy. He did the
Yeah.
Before series or
So
Before trilogy.
he's
Boyhood.
done so he's done something like that, but it wasn't like that's a like indie. That's like indie stuff. That's not a big budget blockbuster thing, you know.
And that's like
And that's
that's not like
also-
a franchise kind of thing either.
He's
Yeah.
doing that creatively, like as a creative decision, not like it's weird to me that him as a filmmaker would be like, yes, I mean the technology aspect of it is there, but it's like how worth it is it to you if you know that if these are the movies that you really want to make and you want to see it through. It's weird to think that like, okay, I'm going to do this, but there's going to be a majority of my audience that aren't going to live to see the third, fourth, whatever, like the end of this series because it's going to take that long.
Right. Right.
I don't know.
No, that makes perfect
Odd.
sense. Like, why did he want to make? Is he making like 6?
Yeah,
5 or 6 is what I've heard.
6 or I think it's like 6 or 7, but
Yeah, I've heard like 7 back in the day, and then 5 more recently, and I don't know. 2 out of more than 3, I think. So it's like George R. R. Martin. He just said something recently where he's like, "Man, the Viserys in House of the Dragon is such a good character. It makes me want to rewrite that book to like include that interpretation of the character." It's like, motherfucker, finish the books you already started.
right?
Yeah.
You're before you can't.
I mean, make an appendices or like a companion thing where it's like, well, if I, in this chapter I would have done this, but like don't go back and rewrite the book. Just like make like a little side plot or a side story or another
the
story.
that you already started is taking this long. Do we want to actually see it through, or what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of authors I've found out like they work way differently when they're dealing with like a series of books that they have. Like maybe they have a good scope of like where they want the story to end, and I think he knows his ending. He's just trying to like pepper in the things that give it those details that people really love from his book. So it's like the book's written, right? He's just kind of painting a better picture and putting more detail into it.
Okay.
At least that's what I think his method is, because he knows his. I think he's writing the last 2 in tandem. Like he's writing. What is the next one? The Winds of Winter and then the Dreams of Spring. Is that how it goes? And like Dreams of Spring will be like the last one.
I don't. I think.
So maybe that's his method, because I know like when he had a sit down discussion, I think with Stephen King, he's like, "Oh, Stephen, how do you write so fast?" He was like, "I just write. I mean, I set aside some time to sit down and write." And I could see George maybe was being like, well, "Okay, well, that's not how I work. I kind of work slowly and methodically and try to think things and catch things that maybe I have to rewrite, or if like somebody comes to me and it's like, oh, that's an error that is contradictory to something you already set up previously or something like that." I can see when you're writing a series of books like, oh shit, like I forgot that this character's hair color was this color. God dang it, I have to go back.
Right.
Stuff like that can come up.
I hear you.
Anything else to say about Avatar?
I don't know what more I can say.
I know it's. I like the idea of it going forward with another story to tell in a different biome or different area of Pandora.
Sure,
but I still don't know like what the dynamics would be and why the humans are always the baddies. Like that doesn't really make me connect with the story. It's like, hey, tell me more about what's happening on Earth, like, because I kind of want to know how the human race is doing. I don't really care about
because
blue kitties.
The aliens are depicted as like tribal, and if they were the bad guys, people would get all upset.
Yeah,
and it's always better to just be like, man bad, man evil, man do war, man kill, man bad.
Yeah, it's more like corporation bad, but like the blue people don't have any idea of what corporations are. Like, what?
No.
Corporations? Is that your deity?
I mean, that would be an interesting thing to do, I think, is to like actually take it that far and be like, oh, you what is the USMC? Is that your god? What are their tenets? What do you believe?
Well, they do call the humans, they call them the sky people. It's like, what? We're the sky people? Sure, I guess we just play along. We're the sky people.
Sure, dude.
Sure, dude. That's fine. Well, that's our Avatar digression. I guess looking forward to James Cameron's next $3 billion hit.
Behind you all the way, Jim. Really can't wait. Great stuff.
I really wish he would just stick to Terminator, because I think he would have been awesome to just continue that series.
Yep.
Some good old JC, you know?
Oh, yeah.
With a name like that and those initials, he's got to...
Yeah, you can't help but be successful, you know?
Yeah. All right, well, we'll discuss more Avatar in the future video, maybe, if we are not dead by then. Who knows?
Yeah.
I gotta live to see my boy Jim's what he does. I gotta see what my boy does.